The Arts of Ancient America's galleries here in the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing in the Metropolitan Museum cover indigenous art from North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean until 1600. Over 6,000 years of culture in a completely new setting. The Michael C. Rockefeller Wing was an enormous milestone for the museum when it opened in 1982. It covers 3 different areas: the arts of ancient Americas, the arts of Oceania, and the arts of sub-Saharan Africa. But now, 45 years later, we felt that it's important not only to completely change how we represent these objects, but also make sure that we inject our newest findings, our newest ideas, our newest scholarship about these objects.
This reinstallation showcases nearly 700 works highlighting the artistic legacy of indigenous artists in the millennia before the Spanish invasion in the 16th century. The collection includes extraordinary works of monumental stone sculpture, delicate works of jade and of gold, and also a new gallery that features textiles and featherwork.
We tend to think about these objects as static, but you have to think of them in use, in daily life, in ceremonies. They also convey a lot of deep meanings.
There was far more conversation and connection across regions in the ancient Americas than we once believed, as we've been able to reflow the collection to really celebrate this exchange of materials and of ideas. These magnificent eagle reliefs are a great place to start our visit to the galleries of the arts of the ancient Americas. They were once part of a larger composition, and they were created probably between 900 and 1200 of the Common Era on the coast of Mexico. And the composition features these marvelous eagles, and eagles are apex predators, so they're remarkable symbols of power through time.
So these fantastic panels actually came to us through Frederick Edwin Church, the great Hudson River School painter, the fantastic landscape painter of the 19th century, and early trustee of the Met. So it was an artist who really brought these works to the Met and who had a deep understanding that these works need to be part of a museum that started to become this universal institution.
The Met was the first art museum in the United States to present ancient American art. And the museum in the 19th century embraced ancient American art. These were considered American antiquities for an American museum.
But also, we see here how the research that has been made in the past years lead us to know more about what we are seeing and how we engage with art today.
So how do you think they were originally colored? What do we know about that?
So here you can see traces of blue. And the blue is placed on these little circles that are like jade ornaments, chalchihuitl for the Nahuatl, but also the water and the feathers. So all the precious materials for the ancient Mesoamericans.
It's also wonderful with the daylight that you can really see the artistry of the sculptors and the way those feathers are subtly layered up, that play of light and shadow. We wanted to plan these new galleries in concert with our colleagues across Latin America because we wanted to make sure that we were representing the most recent scholarship. For example, we're very happy to be working with Alejandro de Avila.
Alejandro de Avila is not only an anthropologist, he's also a botanist and also a promoter of the art and culture of his natal landscape, Oaxaca.
I am so impressed with this space, the interaction between the pieces, how it all fits together, dignifies the collection that you have on display.
All that you have created in Oaxaca with these great institutions has deepened and expanded our understanding of these great traditions.
There is a continuity that goes back for thousands of years in the interaction between people in Oaxaca and other regions of Latin America and the local environments. And in trying to portray what is specific to the area, what is unique to the region, we are looking at a broader picture. And this is what I see here in this particular display. It's a picture of placing these traditions, which are so emotionally important to us, in the larger story of the arts of people.
So we're looking at a ceramic container here made by Nazca artists around the middle of the first millennium of the Common Era. And it's in the shape of a cornstalk. But what's interesting about this vessel is we're seeing the cornstalk shed of its husks, of its leaves, of the silken tassels at the top. So the artist was really stripping things down to the most important elements to see this fundamentally important plant in its full vitality. In the ancient Andes, ceramic vessels were really one of the great canvases for ancient Andean artists. And really around this time, after about 500 CE, we start to see in the Andes that maize beer or corn beer, chicha, becomes the ritual beverage of primary importance.
For me, this piece is a beautiful visual indication of something that we're only now starting to understand. The role that the Andean world played in the domestication of maize. For a long time, archaeologists in Mexico have been puzzled by the fact that the earliest evidence that we have for maize is incomplete domestication. So now the possibility arises that in fact the ear of maize is the result of people in the Andean realm, on the coast and in the highlands, domesticating what had spread halfway domesticated from Mesoamerica. Wild precursors of the plant are only found on the Pacific side of Mexico. It clearly originates in Mexico, but it's a matter of national pride that we also have the full ear. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's the ingenuity and the patience and the admiration for this plant, the status that it had as the source of elite or ceremonial drink like chicha, which was the motivation for developing the ear.
But that reminds us that it was a world that it was connected. That's a trait of the American continent.
Indeed.
We share so much. Exactly. We share maize, we share cacao, we share so many things within the continent because there's a history of trade, migration, and communication.
Indeed.
These works are so wonderful because they provide us with these tangible connections to ideas and beliefs of the ancient Americas.
And I feel that this wing is the space where I see that vision more clearly. There are these links. These are not isolated cultures.
In the gallery, we have several objects related to the Mesoamerican ballgame. It's an enduring tradition. It has been played for more than 3,000 years. We have to remember that in Europe, they didn't know rubber. They were accustomed to wood, to leather, and they had balls made with those materials. So when the first Spaniards came to America, even Christopher Columbus, when he arrives to America, he saw the ball game and he saw these amazing properties of bouncing of the ball. It was so engaging and so alive that Hernán Cortés, he also took some ball players to the court of Charles V in Europe to show not only the properties of the ball, but also how it was performed and played and its significance.
The reaction was, this is the work of the devil. How can anything bounce? But the ingredients for rubber, you don't find in Western Mexico. The latex for the ball is of a tree of the tropical humid forest and has to be combined with the juice of a climbing plant that is a member of the morning glories. So they may have been trading, or there may be a source of rubber that we don't know of.
And the amazing thing is that the combination between the morning glory and the rubber makes a kind of vulcanization. So it lasts more than the actual rubber. And this tradition continues. That's why we know about it as well.
And it's a game of considerable antiquity, isn't it?
Indeed. And it is a game that we would call a game, but it was a ceremony as much as it was a game. The ball apparently embodied the movement of the sun across the heavens. They're such compelling figures. They're so much more alike contemporary art than a Toltec sculpture or the Zapotec urn or a Maya inscription. These are much more akin to us. Only recently do we have the archaeology to understand what these were about. These were mostly funerary accompaniments being placed in the graves. And Western Mexico was apparently a less stratified society, less aristocrats versus common people. These had more of a feeling of everybody's more or less the same. And I think that's part of their appeal.
This is actually one of the oldest objects in our collection. It was created in the first millennium before the Common Era, and the Olmec were really terrific at working with jade, weren't they?
Yes, they choose a very, very special dark shade of jade. And also jade is as hard as steel, so it's very difficult to work.
It's a very rare material. It wasn't from the region where this mask was made, right?
No. Jade comes from a very, very special source that is located in Guatemala. So you have to imagine that Olmecs that usually live around the coast of Veracruz had to travel thousands of kilometers to find this kind of precious stone.
One thing I've always loved about it is this visual tension, because in some ways it looks very much like a human face. But on the other hand, you start to notice details that aren't fully human, that allude to supernatural power. So the cleft in the head, there are also very light incisions on the cheeks. They probably refer to the Olmec maize god. Maize was arguably the most important staple crop in Mesoamerica. And that little cleft in the forehead reminds me of the sort of divot you would make when you were planting corn. It speaks to fertility and abundance, and it's sort of an eternal life in a way.
For me, this is one of my favorite objects in the gallery, because when you approach this face, you are really watching a face of the past, and you can imagine even the artists who made it.
This is a standing female figure from the Huasteca region of Mesoamerica, what is now northeast Mexico. And she is standing with her hands on her belly, perhaps a reference to generative power. She has an incredibly elaborate headdress and beautiful ear ornaments. And what's really interesting about this sculpture is, thanks to recent research, we know a lot more about women of power in the ancient Americas. And in the Huasteca, we now know that men and women probably held equal power. And they were depicted in a similar way, with similar regalia, similar headdresses.
And sandstone, it's quite soft. So it allowed you to have these details that are truly amazing. You can see the eyes, the mouth, and if you go closer, even you can see her teeth.
Prior to her arrival, we didn't have so many works that could celebrate these women of power. You know, I think before 1982, the number of high-status women tombs that had been found were very small. We've seen advances in archaeology, physical anthropology, but also in art history that has cast new light on the role of women. And has been one of the most exciting aspects about research in the Americas in the last decades. So we're standing in front of a case featuring a number of extraordinary nose ornaments. And these were made by artists of the Moche culture. So the north coast of Peru. These are mostly between about 200 of the Common Era and about 800 of the Common Era. And Moche metallurgists were the geniuses of ancient American metallurgy. They also developed an extraordinary new technology known as electrochemical plating. What they're doing is they're dissolving the silver or the gold in a strong acid bath using the salts, and then dipping a copper object into that solution and removing it, and you end up with a work that looks like it's solid gold, but it's actually just covered with a microns thin layer of gold. It's an extraordinary technology that wouldn't be discovered in Europe for centuries hence. One of the things I love about this particular nose ornament, it's in the shape of somebody wearing a nose ornament. It's very meta.
And it's important today as well. So you can imagine them, how we wear jewelry or how we wear these objects in daily life, because they give us the sense of being part of a community or marking our difference with other community.
This sense of movement, that sense of light, this kinetic quality gives these an extraordinary sense of life. It gives us pause to reflect on the sort of ornaments we create to adorn the body. And how do we establish distinction? How do we connect with ideas of divine power? Textiles are arguably one of the oldest art forms in the Andes. The earliest textiles date back to about 10,000 years ago. And at certain times and in certain places and in certain contexts, textiles were also the most valued art form. They represent a huge amount of labor and skill and imagination. Some of these textiles in this gallery are 1,500 years old, and yet the colors are still so vibrant. This shirt is not quite that old. This shirt was probably made sometime in the 15th, possibly early 16th century, and it was made on the north coast of Peru by Chamu weavers. The Chamu were the last big polity before the Inca Empire basically dominated most of Western South America, and they were known for their great artists. What's interesting about this shirt is the imagery, as we see two fantastic rampant felines here with big claws, upright ears, and fangs there. We like to joke that we call them the muscle cats because you almost see these bulging biceps there on these cats.
And also you can see here maybe two weavers working together. So that's amazing, thinking about collaboration, about social life, about what is happening in a community. You can see that these two felines resemble each other, but they are different.
Exactly.
Because they were made by two different persons.
This shirt, for me, is a fantastic example to further what we were talking about with regards to the maize beaker. You have the ground cloth, cotton, but it's not quite cotton. It's greenish brown cotton. It's a type of cotton that is a result of breeding. In the old world traditions, quotes old world, you just see white. You don't see an interest in developing color in the fiber. I don't think it's a coincidence that in Mesoamerica and the Andes, working with different species, you breed color. I think that again is evidence for interaction between the realms. But furthermore, this red must be cochineal. And it's not hard to make sure that it is cochineal. Cochineal, we now know for sure, was domesticated in southern Mexico. But the host plant, because cochineal is a parasite of a kind of cactus, Opuntia, nopal we call it in Mexico, the plant on which cochineal thrives was taken to the Andes. The Andes have plenty of species of native Opuntias, but even today, cochineal is raised on the Mexican Opuntia that was brought to the Andes with the insect, the source of the beautiful red. And right from what I'm looking at, you can see variegation in the red, which adds to the beauty of the weaving. This is something that is only known to us from the last 10 years with the new tools that we have of research. And this blows me away because it has been the dogma of textile studies that cochineal originated in the Andes. But now we know otherwise. It's a more nuanced view of our past.
I think it has been important to us to show the connections of these traditions with a global history and how these civilizations fit into this global history. We need to remember that this is the ancient heritage, the history of some 27% of New York City and the tri-state area. And it's a history that's deeply important to the city, the state of New York, our country, and the world.
In these reimagined galleries, we want to celebrate the vibrant creativity of artists from the past who really shaped the rich cultural landscape of their territory. And I'm inspired by the words of Jorge Luis Borges. For me, museums are like magical cabinets. They hold objects filled with meanings, waiting for us to step closer, to observe, and to reflect. It is through our engagement with these objects from the past that they come to life, breaking their silence to share their stories.